my adult journey began in my early 20s when I made a choice to not make cereal commercials or soap commercials, but rather move my filmmaking, my dyslectic filmmaking skills into documentaries to interview people that are doing extraordinary things. So I used my skills as a filmmaker to knock on the doors of people that I read about or heard about, and one of them was Joseph Chilton Pierce. I had at that time my younger son, who's now 40, was 2 years old, and we were in a spa someplace, and he was precocious, and the attendant says, "Oh, you have a magical child," and I said, "What's that?" And she said, "Oh, there's this wonderful book called Magical Child, and it's extraordinary." So I read the book, and I had inklings that the whole paradigm of what it means to be a parent was needed to be updated. And when I read Joe's book, he had already done what I imagined needed to be done with Magical Child. So I contacted him, and after a couple of years, we finally were able to meet. And when we sat down, excuse me, I shared with Joe that bonding was not just a sentimental thing, but rather there's a telepathic communication or resonance that goes on between the parent and the child 24/7. And the child picks up on these internal states that the parent is expressing, and they use that information as a way of learning how to navigate the world. So when the parent turns a rock over and sees a scorpion, they obviously react both strongly internally, but also through the sensory system. And the child at any age is going to pick up not only the sensory cues, but also the whole state of meaning of this shocked response. And that was the illustration I gave to Joe. So the relationship is as much telepathic as it is sensory. It was my position. And Joe said, "Well, I've only been saying this for 30 years, and what you've just said is the clearest expression of that. How can I help?" And that began a 25 or 20 year, mentored father-son relationship with Joe that certainly changed my life, and probably his in a way, because it's always reciprocal.
Yeah.
At the same time, I was working as a documentary filmmaker with Krishnamurti and David Bohm. And another project that I continue to be vested in. This is 50 years now. So I've been swimming in their pond for all this time. Um, so literally, David Chamberlain, I met David. He was just publishing his first book, and he told me about this new organization that they just formed called APA. And they had one meeting, and then they had a second meeting in Newport Beach, and I attended that meeting way back. Um, Barbara Findeisen was there, Stan Groff, William Emerson, um, Sir and David, I think, were the main presenters. And it was really great because William Emerson at that time in his presentation was talking about his intervention with birth traumas. And what he said was quite clear. He said, well, what his style was to meet the baby, establish a bond with them. A bond, I'm going to say, is a safe place, right? So being bonded means you feel safe to play, you feel safe to explore. Bonding is the prerequisite to play, and play is to engage and learn. So if we redefine, without bonding, you can't play. You're going to defend. So William's primary process was to connect with the baby, and then he would very slowly inch his way up and re would begin to touch the area that was injured during the birth. Could be a shoulder or dislocated this or whatever the trauma was, the neck. He would begin to massage that area that was traumatized. But he would do it under the guise or the umbrella of bonding or safety and trust, right? Basic trust. So the baby trusted him. And so when he touched the spot that was tender, the baby didn't, react with typical defensiveness, but rather was in a more relaxed state and an accepting state because of play. And then William played with the sore area until the trigger went away. So bonding gave William the ability to help the baby release the trauma reaction to this stimulus, right? And the baby let it go and was free instead of holding on to that trigger response for its whole life. Pretty simple. So, William this was my first introduction to his somatic technique and what pre and perinatal psychology was looking at, et cetera, et cetera. So in our context, you had read one of my papers that I just wrote on play, and
Yeah.
this was to honor Stuart Brown and he's 92, amazing. So, and I've known him for 50 years. So this was to honor Stuart for um, his passion about play. But I really want to say once again that when we look at, let's redefine bonding. Bonding is creating a safe place. I'm safe. This is safe. This is home, right? I have nothing to fear. That's bonding. But bonding then invites relationship, and play is what happens in relationship. You play with the relationship and you learn from the play. So when Joe said play is the act of learning, he was that's exactly right. Play is the act of learning. And that's how you grow and that's how you unfold. And if you're not safe, you can't play.
Mm. I
Now,
was reading,
yes,
Michael. Sorry, but I was reading in your in one of the papers you shared that David Bohm placed the play as the necessary context which predetermines or leads to science, to exploration and innovation. Can you bring this to the discussion and share a little bit more about that?
well, this is the polarity, right? Dave was a premier scientist, one of the leading physicists of the 20th century, Einstein's protege. I
Mm.
had the opportunity to meet him in the early 80s or late 70s and knew him for over a decade. um, and had an opportunity to meet with him whenever he was in town, or even when I traveled to the UK. I met with him informally at his office and so on and so forth. So we had this friendship and this relationship. And again, I'm not a scientist, I don't do the math, and he appreciated that. Um, but this statement that he made, which when you really think about it, in the broader context of what play is, um, Dave reframed the whole thought process, the essence of the whole thinking cognitive process as theater.
Mm.
Theater. Thought is theater. It's make believe. It's what is this? What is that? It's imaginative.
Yeah.
Thought is the expression of one's imagination and trying to name or define something. Now, when you really look at that, the scientific method is to test rigorously, what is that? What is it? Is this the way it works?
Mm.
Now, what Dave was saying was that thought without the both imagination and the rigor to test, if you don't have those two components in your everyday thought process, then the thought process is meaningless and even very dangerous. So the essence of the thought process itself is play. But we mistreat that as being, we reify it. The term is reification. When you reify something, you take an abstraction and you pretend that it's real,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
I'm a Christian.
Yeah.
I'm a German. I'm Michael.
Yeah.
All of those are basically reification. We are reifying an abstraction and pretending that it's real, concrete, independent of the thought process.
Yeah.
And that's the fallacy. That's the main fallacy is that we haven't matured with our understanding of how imagination and thought works so that we don't reify.
So actually, what you are sharing here, very important, is that the moment we imprison a universe in in a word or in an image, we go away from the truth. We uh,
Right.
distance ourselves from what really happens.
So the term is a misuse of memory,
Yeah.
right? There's a fundamental systemic global misuse of memory because we haven't grown up enough to really understand how the system works,
Mm,
period. And our wars, our jealousies, our envies, all the attributes that we give to our ego
mm,
and that we give to culture are a fundamental misuse of memory.
mm,
And the only tradition that really looks at that this sanely, in my understanding, is the Tibetan Buddhists,
mm.
right? So Tibetan Buddhism understands this misuse of memory, and that's central to, that's the first step. You have to recognize that there's this fundamental flaw going on, that the tool that you're using to fix the problem is the problem,
Yeah.
and it can't be done. You can't fix it. You can't fix the problem with the problem. And again, Einstein and Bohm in their applied the same principle to science. So understanding, so having an understanding of the true nature of what thought is core. And this is essentially Krishnamurti's lifelong message.
Mm.
It's really not any more complicated than that. So when we stop reifying our thought process, we use it as a tool to solve problems, but we don't identify with the tool. I'm not a hammer, right?
Yeah, that's right.
I'm not a hammer. I'm not a hammer, right? I use the hammer to drive the nail, but I'm not a hammer. Now, if we could only do that with our life and with our politics, we would live in a different world. So this is the fundamental flaw that we carry forward that very few have addressed, and so we keep trying to solve the problem with the problem, and it's like the snake biting its tail is the archetype image of that. So
We need
basically,
more.
that's if we miss this if we make this fundamental mistake of what our consciousness is, how it operates, then naturally we're going to make the same mistake with what we call bonding and play,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
We're not going to play. We're going to take our play seriously,
yeah,
which is David points out in the paper that I shared with you that that's playing false with the nature of the thought process is to take it seriously, to not to treat it as theater.
yeah,
Now, play, if once we have that understanding, then play takes on a very different character, right? The thought process is play. My relationship to the world and how I grow and learn is through this state that we call play. Play is a state, not an activity. And the
yeah,
state is what governs the whole game. You know, um, it's like basketball. When you go onto the basketball court, you adopt and agree to play through the rules that define the game of basketball. So in the same way, when we misuse memory the way we do, then when we step into the court called thinking and imagination, we misuse it's playing false with the structure of what it is that we're doing, and that was David's primary focus. So in order to be a good scientist, one has to be in the state of play.
which is a very specific state, a mindset, a operandi,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Operandi, better say, yeah. So it's a total openness, as I heard you say, or I read you say, to testing, not attaching to specific conclusions if they do not work, but be willing to try again and again and again until something of value comes up. Right?
Completely. And you're going to say that about baking a cake or being a theoretical physicist. It's
Yeah.
not going to be different, right? The
Yeah.
rules of the game of play are the same, whether you're changing a tire or painting a painting or trying to figure out how the universe works, right? So the state is the same, the state of inquiry. We could,
Yeah.
again, Ashley Montagu is quoted in the paper that I sent, and Ashley wrote a book called Growing Young. And it was he wrote 50 books, 51 books, and there was a sequel or a parallel to Growing Young, which was called The Dehumanization of Man. So you have Growing Young, which is what nature has designed us to do, and then you have the dehumanization, which is the misuse of memory
Mhm.
and this reification process and all the suffering and the pains and the so on that goes with ego and culture.
Mhm.
Identifying with ego and culture is your jealousies and your greed and all of that stuff. And all of that comes about because of not being bonded and free enough to play.
But Michael, when we know so much and so clearly we can understand the benefits of play, why do we, why don't we allow it to flourish? Why do we go in best scenarios to structured play, to algorithms in technology games, or all these things? What is that brings us to this direction?
Well, again, we have to differentiate between the activity and the state.
Mhm.
Play is a state,
Yes,
like
be.
anger. Anger is a state.
Yeah.
And the state defines your relationship to whatever it is you're doing. Violence and protection and whatever it is. Excuse me. So, so you have to, once you understand that play is the state, now that's what Ashley Montagu called the genius of childhood. The genius of childhood is the state of play, which is nature's design for learning and performance at any age or in any activity throughout your whole life. So nature designed us to be in this state of wonder and curiosity and adventure, mystery, inquiry. Inquiry not as analysis, but I use the word wonder, to wonder about. So that's what nature designed us. But then we have this thing called intellect. And intellect and language go together. The naming, right? This is this is that, this is how it works. So intellect is charged with naming and defining. You hear a twig in the forest and the campfire, and is it dangerous? Is it a bear? Is it a predator? Or is it your partner? Right? So intellect is designed to answer, to address that question. What is that? Friend or foe?
Mm,
It's a tool. But if we reify what intellect invents and treat it as a real thing instead of theater, the whole system goes south.
mm,
The whole system is corrupt. It's like AI in your computer taking over and making decisions for you.
mm,
That's a simile. So that's what's going on in our head is the intellect is kicking in because of its lack of basic trust. Everything is a threat. So it has to protect us against everything. And it goes 24/7. And it basically blots out, supersedes, or pushes the state of play, which is nature's design, off the table. So nature designed this wonderful capacity for abstract imagination as a tool. But because we don't know how it operates, we become the sorcerer's apprentice, and the whole thing goes to hell in a handbag. So that's my basic answer is that sorry about that. Because the adults have lost their grounding in their true nature, which is play, they don't allow play. It's all nose to the grindstone and rote memory. It's all the things that the intellect is made of. So its form and structure overlays the what I call the intelligence of play. Intelligence being the way, play being the way that intelligence expresses,
mm. So, can you
right?
speak a little bit more about the differences between the intellect which you have spoken about intellect. Can you now expand a little bit more about the intelligence and why it isn't different?
Yes, they're completely different orders. David Bohm would use the word order, meaning um, what order? The nature and structure of intelligence is fundamentally different than the nature and structure of intellect.
Mm,
Language comes out is an expression of intellect. So because we have this wonderful capacity to play, we evolved the capacity for intellect.
mm,
Intellect is a subset and rests upon real intelligence, but it is not intelligent because it crystallizes things. It names them. As you said when we first logged on, language turns flow into bricks,
yes.
right? So it intellect freezes
Mm,
as a concept what we say river, right?
yeah, beautiful.
River. River is a concept and it's static, it's not alive, it's not moving. It's the
Right.
movement of the water that creates the impression of a river. The river doesn't exist without the movement,
Yeah,
right?
beautiful.
So it's the movement that creates the river, but when we turn it into a concept, we stop the movement and it takes on a completely different nature. And then what happens is that we believe that our concept is the thing. Krishnamurti said 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times, the word is not the thing.
Yeah.
But we are identified with the concept. We identify with the concept because our identity, what we think of as me, our social image and ego, is a concept. It's not me. I'm not the name, right? So, but we mistake that. We think that we are the name. We identify with the rewards and punishments and the feelings that gave rise to all of this stuff that we call me, and we lose touch with our true nature in the naming. or in the by identifying with the name, we lose touch with our true nature, and we think we're a German, or we think we're a doctor, right? We're not a doctor. We're a human
Yeah,
being, right?
yeah.
So play is not, you can use the intellect to play. You can play with intellect, which the theoretical people do, and it's a wonderful toy, it's a wonderful tool, but the key is not identifying with the theater. You use it as theater, and you don't think that you're the theater, right? But we lose track of that. We're not quick enough and bright enough to stay alert all day. So we believe in our mental enchantments, right? It's like you go to the movie theater and it's dark and you forget who you are because now you're watching the movie. And that's what's going on inside all of us all the time. So when you reconnect with who you actually are, then you finally see that it's all theater, and you're not a German, right? You're not a doctor, you're not the principal, you're not even a parent, right? You are this flow, you are this river that's flowing and learning and growing and adapting through play. That's what you actually are.
And I wonder, Michael, when the adults, especially in the Western world and the States, have taken our distance from this naturalness of our existence and have sent away this authentic, spontaneous free play for ourselves, and then we do it for our children. Is there any hope for the adults or the children?
This is an old story. We can go back to Genesis with Adam and Eve in the garden.
Mm,
The garden actually represents play.
mm,
That's what it means. This is the state of play with nature, with the animals. It's innocence, it's learning, it's growing, it's ease, it's discovery, it's expansion, it's all these wonderful qualities. So the garden is play. When you take a bite from the tree of knowledge, the whole trouble begins because you now the intellect. So the tree of knowledge really represents the emergence of the neocortex in our evolution and the explosion of this new capacity for images and concepts and images. We now have created, now we can come up with, we can imagine, and we can use language to share what we imagine.
mm,
So there's a movement of attention from innocence, mystery, play to um, the intellect with its imagery, mental imagery.
mm,
And the imagery created by the neocortex is so compelling, so enchanting that it equals sensory experience, right? So attention is seduced from its natural order, which is play, and it was seduced by the intellect, tree of knowledge, etc. These mythic overlays. But basically, that's and that tale was 600 BC, 500 BC when that was written, right? So we're looking. Um, so other researchers have described what we call civilization the last 10,000 years is only 1% to 3 or 4% of human evolution. But it's basically the manifestation of the neocortex of image and concept. So there's been this morphing of the brain and what it gives attention to for the last 10,000 years, increasingly we have moved from the st authentic state of play into Descartes, mechanical clock and all of the science and all of these things. And of course, many of the discoveries of the so-called Enlightenment were beneficial, but so were racism and genocide and what you said, what's the word? Uh, Colonialism and imperialism, right? When Columbus went to discover the New World, how audacious is that? He didn't discover the New World. The New World was already there and
Yeah.
had been inhabited for millions of years. They
Yeah.
didn't discover anything, right?
Yeah.
And the audacity of Manifest Destiny to claim it for Spain, this is now mine and I get to murder you and take all your stuff, is a mindset. And
Yeah.
it's not play.
Mm.
It's not our real authentic nature. It's actually the intellect gone nuts.
Mm. We see
And
Michael repeat this colonialism story. We see it repeat itself with the space exploration now.
but it also is, but parenting is colonialism.
Mm. In what ways can you speak about it? Yeah.
Well, I'm just making that
Yeah.
up. I've never said it before, but again, in the first book that I wrote with Joe Pierce, it was an exploration of this state called play. Now, um, most parenting is a dictatorship. The adult is superimposing or imposing their rules and their will, and always for the best of the intentions, of course, like Alice Miller, for your own good,
Yeah.
right? So the parent is imposing their mental concepts, not play, not really paying much attention to what the child is experiencing. There's not much relationship in most parenting. It's authoritarian, it's a dictatorship. It's also sensory deprivation and child abuse in many cases. I was walking down the street with my little dog this morning, and there was this mom. She was 25, and she had her earplugs in, and she was talking on the phone, pushing a baby stroller with a towel over it.
Mm.
This is sensory deprivation. This is an isolation chamber.
Of course.
What benefit does this kid actually have laying flat in this stroller, covered up, isolated, not contact with the mom, right? And this mom is completely oblivious and thinks that this is a good thing.
Yeah.
Now, that's what I mean. This is colonialism. So the mom is imposing her stupid ideas, unbonded, unconnected, sensory deprivation and child abuse on her infant, thinking that it's totally natural and normal. And this is how you do it. I'm doing my baby a favor by covering it up and isolating it. So that's what I mean by parenting is imperialism or colonialism, is this way that the parent is not connected, not taking the cues, not holding the baby, and not sensing the baby, and all the things that your work and APA's work and ISPPM and et cetera, all of those visionaries are like William Emerson. William Emerson, the first step is to connect with the baby.
Yeah.
Now, once we connect with the baby, we can play, which means that the baby and I are going to share meaning together in this reciprocal dance. Now, without connecting, without taking your cues from the child at every age, including your wife and your husband and your boss, right?
Yeah.
Without taking your cues in this sensitive, playful way, it becomes violent. It becomes colonialism, or dictatorship.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's what I'm saying. So play is our true authentic nature. It's the true nature of the thought process itself. And when we forget that or lose touch with that, then the mechanical constructs and the bricking that the cognitive world imposes its rules, the rules of the intellect supersede your authentic nature, and that's the essential challenge.
Actually, you bring here another layer that of ecology. The more we go into this direction as a Western world, we see that we also distance ourselves from nature and honoring the planet or life on Earth. And if we do not realize what we are doing to ourselves and the environment, whatever this environment contains, our children and the future generations, we may hand down to our children serious challenges to do something.
Well, you're talking when you say our children, you're talking about the future of the species, right?
Of course, yeah,
So it's not just my kid.
of course.
What we're doing to our children, we are doing to the future of our species. And this misuse of memory that I described is at the root or the core of the damage and harm that we are inflicting on the future of humanity.
Mm.
Now, um, just and this well-meaning mother plugged into her technology is numbed, blinded. She's totally blind to the reciprocal relationship that true bonding and true play and her true nature is. She's blind to her own nature. So obviously the blind can't um, um, respond fully and appropriately because they're blind.
Mm.
And this is actually a long-standing prophecy. You know, Joe Pierce 25 years ago said that very simply, in whole capacities, human whole capacities can be lost in a single generation due to the lack of modeling.
Mm.
He called it the model imperative. And basically, what he's saying, he predated epigenetics by about 50 years. Epigenetics is the realization that the genome takes its cues from the environment and has wildcards built into it to reshuffle the deck based on what the environment is telling it. So the whole genetic structure is not mechanical like a blueprint, rather it's flexible and adaptable, which is the model imperative. We take our cues from the model and then we adapt our capacities to meet that model. That's the model imperative. That's epigenetics.
Mm.
But if you are colorblind, you don't you don't see the colors. You don't see them. So
Yeah.
basically, we are increasingly colorblind in a sensory way, in a cognitive way. We are increasingly generation by generation, technology by technology. It's kind of this reciprocal thing. Joe was also uh, deeply concerned about technology. Krishnamurti gave his last presentation, his last breath publicly was on technology.
Mm.
Um, Technology color blinds us
Mm. And
in the same way that the intellect and Christopher Columbus's mm, crazy ideas about himself and manifest destiny allowed him to burn the natives and murder the natives and steal everything from them with impunity and actually go back and be proud of what he did, right? That's Christopher Columbus.
yeah,
And we're doing, look at what's going on in Gaza. Look at
yeah,
what's going on around the world. Look at what's going on between the nations and the Soviets and around the world today. So it's not different. It's the same craziness, the same insanity, fundamental insanity is going on, but it's expressing that same insanity expresses in the parent-child relationship. And the only person who can change that is the model.
Hmm.
The kid can't change it. The kid comes in with its infinite potential, to use David Bohm's phrase. The
Yeah.
baby walks in here with infinite potential, infinite capacities. And again, Pierce spent his whole life, adult life, documenting, the crack in the cosmic egg and these amazing capacities that the human is capable of innately if given a model. But if we only have on my iPhone and a screen as the model,
Yeah.
we become colorblind and we to life, to the planet, to Gaia,
Yeah.
to Sophia,
Yeah.
right? Right? We're blind to Sophia. And then we become Christopher Columbus, right?
Yeah. We are going to embed this into human beings with the ectogenesis and the technologically cultivating beings, human beings. I think that there is a very crucial transition period now when we need to wake up and see what we are doing and what we are designing for ourselves and life.
So the challenge with technology is that you go back 50 years, more than 50 now. I mean, 100, 1950, when television, really came in, and before that, so from the 1920s to the 50s was what was called the graphic revolution.
Yeah,
And then came motion pictures and film and TV and the moving picture kind of stuff.
yeah.
And visionaries in that field, Jerry Mander being one of them, he wrote a book called The Four Arguments for the Elimination of Television. He was an advertising executive and he was horrified by how easy it was to get people to do whatever he wanted.
Mm,
And he looked at that, really carefully and wrote the book about it. Now, um, those people who want to control other people grab onto these technologies and this understanding of how easy it is to manipulate consciousness through image,
mm,
right? So they invest in new image making technologies so that the image making is closer and closer to what we actually do with our own brain.
mm,
And the closer the counterfeit comes to the real, the more blinded we become. We lose the capacity to distinguish between the counterfeit and the real.
yeah.
And that's actually what's going on, and that's why AI and all of these technologies are so seductive because they distance us from ourselves. They certainly alienate us from the nature, from our true nature, which is nature. We grew out of nature. We are
Yes.
nature, right? It's not that nature is an abstract thing. It's not nature out there like a rock. We are that, but we don't experience it that way. So we're colorblind to our own nature, and we become terrorists in our culture, in our lives, in our schools, and so on and so forth. So that's the danger is we're playing with these tools that are changing fundamentally how we perceive reality, and we're not aware that our playing with these counterfeits is changing us fundamentally and how we relate, how we experience and relate to the whole world. We're not aware of that, but it's taking place and faster than a speeding bullet. So that's what's going on with this AI revolution. The computers are talking to us and hi Michael, good morning. What do you want to talk about today? Oh, well, let's say, how do I make a latte that's, pink? So, oh, well, it's really easy. Here's 50 recipes to make pink lattes, right? So that's useful as an encyclopedia, but we're not sensitive to what's going on with our whole cognitive structure, which was David Bohm's point. We don't know how thought works. We're not tuned into it. We don't really understand what we're doing. This is the Sorcerer's Apprentice, right?
Mm.
So Goethe, um, basically saw this in his own lifetime, did the Sorcerer's Apprentice, which is here's this guy, you know, um, typified by Mickey Mouse, playing with the spells, with the magic that what Joe talked about. We have these infinite capacities. We're playing with these things, but we don't know what we're doing.
Mm.
So anyway, this all comes back to play, the difference between play being the ground of human perception and our true identity, and what the neocortex represents as its blocks and its words and its bricks and its concepts. So we have these two domains, and the imagery and enchantment of the intellect is really strong. Um, and not being enchanted by this strong evocative capacity is extremely challenging. So now you have the Buddhist practices and you have various meditative practices, and every single one of them are to awaken us to the distinction between these two orders of reality, one being play, which is our true nature, and the counterfeit reality that the intellect and produces.
Michael, just for one split minute, if we just visualize a possibility when adults have invited and really welcome the mystery and the wonder in everyday life, what would that mean for us?
So I published a second little book, um, having been mentored by Pierce and Montague and Emerson and David and Barbara Findyson and Jean Liedloff and Suzanne Arms and all of these wonderful people, right? Because I, played my documentary card and had a great time playing with these people. So I'm 75. And as I mentioned earlier, I have a daughter who's 11. And when we had a home birth, when Carly came along, even of course during the pregnancy, I was aware of I had two grown sons. Right now, one is 40 and the other is 50, and I have an 11-year-old daughter. So I was aware of what I'm going to call attunement.
Mm.
Attunement.
Yeah.
So I I wrote every 2 weeks, what did I learn from Carly today?
Oh, beautiful.
Right? Every 2 weeks for 2 years, I wrote a little blog essay. What did I learn from Carly today? Which means not what did I teach Carly today, but what did I learn interacting with my authentic nature, which is this child, humanity's true nature, which is this child. And but that's the flip, you see? We're adulterated. Adults are adulterated. We are colorblind. We are messed up, right? We live in this stupid altered reality that we have constructed, which is not us at all. It's all just um, a delusion is the right word. We live in our personal delusions, and that blinds us to our authentic nature, which this child represents. So now, if I can let that go and actually if I can try to just be with the kid and see, and as I said, listen to that telepathic resonance that she is giving to me instead of me giving to her, now the game changes completely, and I can rediscover who I am.
So can I ask what you learned from Curly this week or today?
Well, Joe Pierce makes the observation that play changes with each age and stage of development, which means that who Carly is, and that's why I had to write an essay every 2 weeks because Carly was different every 2 weeks. She was not the same person, which meant that I had to run really fast to catch up to see who we actually are this week,
Yeah.
right? So I had to pay really close attention to who she is. So, there wasn't a single message because what I learned changed every 2 weeks. That's why I had to write another essay because today's different. And that if you really love the other person, then you can be attuned and pay attention to them. If you don't love them, then you can be Christopher Columbus, right? You can do whatever you want.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. But if you love them, so loving the child transforms your Christopher Columbus delusionary nature into somebody who can play, right? So love transforms authority into affectionate play. That's what love does. If you really love them, then you can't be an authority, you have to play.
Yeah.
And that's essentially, and that changes every day, that changes every moment. Um, um, I stopped writing these essays at age 2 because that's when language comes in.
Mm,
So the whole first 2 years was really nonverbal. It
mm.
wasn't intellect. It wasn't talking about ideas and egos and all that stuff. It was just how do you navigate the world with great sensitivity now, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, by loving the child, you give up your identity and you play.
Actually, it is not only when you love a child, when you love anyone, any human
Yeah.
being. That's
Yes, 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 yes. Yeah, 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 yeah. But
oh,
most people, sadly, don't really love that much,
unfortunately.
right? It's because of the way they were raised. They were never taught, or they didn't have loving models. Culture is not a loving model.
Yeah.
Church is not a loving model. Schooling is not a loving model. The business hierarchy is not a loving model.
Yeah.
Capitalism is not a loving model. Wars are not loving models. So we don't have loving models, so it's not their fault that they turn out to be unloving, right? They are simply growing the seeds that we sowed.
Yeah. And Michael, you bring now our attention to silence and presence as the pathways to attunement
Attunement
of
is
uh, this uh, state of play, as you say,
right.
silence and presence, uh, which we do not do much during the day.
Now, I want to be sure I understand your words. Did you use the word silence or science?
Silence,
Silence, yes, silence.
no
So
speaking.
yes, of course. So at the first stage of this first again, as I said, the Tibetan Buddhists and there's probably other systems, but I'm more familiar with Tibetan Buddhism than I am others that may do the same thing. Um, they call it emptiness,
And
emptiness,
yes,
silence. Krishnamurti used the word silence, to
yeah,
have a silent mind.
yeah.
How can you be attuned if you're talking to yourself?
How?
You can't. There's no room, right? So you have to shut up in order to
Yeah.
be in any degree sensitive or attuned. So
Yes.
that's the prerequisite is silence stopping the intellect from dominating your attention is the prerequisite to attention, to attunement and right relationship, empathy, creativity, true intelligence,
And as
right?
you say, goodness, kind.
Goodness. No, absolutely. Great choice of words. Yes. So our authentic nature is fundamentally good. It's goodness. Everybody agrees on that, except the political parties, right? Right? So goodness is our authentic nature, and what corrupts it is preoccupation with self-imposed delusions, which we call our identity, ego, and culture.
Yeah.
Now, what I want to make clear is that when I say that play is a state, what's important to understand is that we should is a reality. We have to use the word reality. Play is an order or a given reality. It's a reality. It's our worldview. It's how we respond. It's how we see ourselves and our relationship to the cosmos. That's a state, right? That's what I'm talking about. Now, when we talk about intellect and knowledge and words, that's a different reality. And they're completely divorced. You can't one. So, as we said earlier, the intellect grew out of the play state. So, play was is our true grounding of our evolution. 99% was grounded in play, and in our last 10,000 years, only 10% has been, or excuse me, 1% has been grounded in intellect. And look what we've done with it.
Yeah.
Great technological advances, but genocide and war and greed and violence and et cetera, et cetera. So reality is state specific. And we have lost touch to our true ground. And almost all of our attention is in the syntax of the intellect.
Mm.
That's where we spend most of our waking conscious time in the syntax or which is the way that the sentences are constructed, right? That's the order of the intellect, the syntax of that, which is not intelligence.
Mm.
And you really you have to be grounded in play in order to discover the limitations of the intellect.
Yes.
Without being grounded in this, you can't see that. You only have one reality. You don't have something to compare it to. So that's fundamental in this whole story is um, discovering in yourself when you use the word silence or emptiness. What is the authentic state of the mind when the tool called intellect is not operative? And all of the various traditions, the meditations and the yogi practices and all of that, all of those are designed to give you a somatic experience of this difference between those two states. The way the brain feels, the way it operates is completely different when you're in play or intelligence or when you're in intellect with its rules and Lego bricks,
Mm. The
right?
thing is, Michael, suppose that humanity starts reconnecting with this play state, and that one after the other human beings come to the word or uh, to the word from this different reality, the play reality. What will be the challenges I mean, aren't they going to feel a little bit like square bolts in round holes?
Well,
Uh,
yeah, if you look at ego and culture as being dysfunctional, right, as being toxic, which they are, no question,
mm,
right? Um, so yes, when you realize that you're not the doctor and not
yeah.
the authority and not this and not that, but and when you trade it for this sensitivity and relationship and discovery and this is when Montague wrote his book, Growing Young. That's what he was talking about. He was talking about our birth. We should continue to expand what he called the genius of childhood our whole life. We should never grow up to be the stuck, miserable, um, conflicted, angry, greedy, violent adults that we are, because that's the culture that we create. We create the culture out of this identity,
Mm,
which is false, and it's a misuse of memory. So that's the thing. So going back to this little book that I wrote, it's called Playful Wisdom. I'm not trying to sell the book, but um, I tried to get it published. I couldn't get it published. That was too niche oriented. Joseph Tilton Pierce is throughout the whole book. One of the iconic early childhood educators, her name was Bev Boss. Bev gave 6,000 workshops to preschool teachers and parents in her tenure. And she's like Joe Pierce in the sandbox, right? Joe has the intellect and all of his connection, and Bev is firmly grounded in what children need and experience as a mom and as a person. So there's antidotes throughout. As I go through my journey of 2 years, attuning to letting go of my identity as whoever I think I am, but you know, doing what you're talking about, shifting one's state from intellect, identity to play and intelligence, um, as I relate to this child, and then we learn and grow. So so anyway, the child represents the ideal mentored relationship. The love of the child represents the ideal mentored relationship for the adult to rediscover their own genius and intelligence.
mhm.
They're not going to get it from each other because each other is already adulterated. They're all screwed up. So they're only going to share what they got. So the kid represents your window and your opportunity to be born again.
Yeah.
Right? So, and that requires attunement, and that requires letting go of the intellect and silently attuning with who this child really is and watching with wonder as he or she changes each week, each day.
And actually, Michael, you needed to reconnect with your observation, your channeling of the attention, which is prioritizing what is important, what is insignificant, make a decision to focus on the significance of this life and not waste the time in the chaotic. Imperialism and colonialism that
Right?
you say. Uh,
Imperial, colonial parenting, right? Colonial parenting, right?
uh,
Making a colony of our kids. I would like to say that again, you can't solve a problem at the level of the problem. So you can't talk yourself into silence. You can't talk yourself into attunement,
mm,
right? So this was again Krishnamurti 101. You
mm,
basically you just shut up,
yeah,
right? You become quiet and turn off the intellect and all of its noise and its enchantments, and then attunement happens. You don't have to do anything. It's your nature. It's already there. You
yeah,
just have to shut up. And it's all given. Ram Dass used to say you have to give it all up to have it all.
Yeah.
right? So basically, you just have to shut up and disassociate from identifying with your images, the
Yeah.
false images of me and of culture. You have to disassociate from that and let those go, abandon them, and then your genius is already there. It's all there. Your attunement, your empathy, your um, yeah, your genius and your um, the right way to respond to this moment is given. You don't have to do anything.
You said that you follow Curly into every couple of weeks, and you mm, notice the uh, gifts that you get from observing and living with her. Uh, I think that this is what we need to copy, or we'd rather copy in our life or model in our life with everybody, including ourselves. Who am I today? Or who are you today? Instead of just believing that after living with a person, even if this person is the self, you know everything. And what do you have to discover about this person? Nothing, because you know it all. We know nothing.
Right?
Yeah,
So we are just like the river is the movement. There is no river without the movement, which is always changing. There is no river, but there's just movement.
yeah,
And we are the same. We are the river, right? We're constantly changing. The cells are changing. Our everything's changing. The only thing that remains same is this misuse of memory. Memory is a very wonderful tool. It does great things, but it's a tool and it freezes. It freezes the river into little bits and then treats those bits as though they were real, and it's delusionary. So but we have not matured in self-knowing to be able to be present with the way that the system's actually working. We fall asleep again over and over again. We become re-enchanted with the next thought. The next thought is a new enchantment.
yeah.
Um, I interviewed the Dalai Lama's um closest colleague and the first prime minister of Tibet in exile, who was quite close with Krishnamurti for many years. He's the only Tibetan or only Buddhist who spent a long time in dialogue with Krishnamurti with his qualifications. I interviewed him over 5 years, and the title of the book, which is our conversations, is Always Awakening.
Mm,
What does that mean? It means that there mindfulness means always awakening out of the enchantment
yeah,
that the intellect represents, right?
right.
Always awakening from this enchantment that's going on. So always awakening. That mindfulness is always awakening. And you apply that to your baby, you apply that to the birth process, you apply it to all these things. Michel Odent just passed.
Yeah,
He said, how do we dehumanize the birth process? How do we get the intellect out of the birth process and let it relax into play, right? Right. So instead of fear and anxiety and all that stuff. So
thank you, Michael, for sharing all that.
sure, sure. Thank you for the invitation.